Good evening, everyone. My name is Ricardo Franco. I am the Director of Family Support Services with MARE. I want to welcome you tonight. Thank you for coming. A few housekeeping things before we start with the fabulous topic that is bringing us together here tonight. If you need a restroom, go this way, left. There is plenty of water if you want water. If in any moment of the first part of the meeting you need to go, and feel free to move around. If you have questions about the second part of the event, there are going to be two MARE staff there, Emily and Debbie. They will be directing you to any questions in terms of the matching part of the event. So the first part is going to be the training. I'm going to introduce the topic, and these three wonderful families who are experts because they are doing it in their own families are going to share live experience with us. Then we will close with a time for questions and answers, and by that time we will take a maybe 5 minutes break, and then you go outside to the hall, to the lobby, and the social workers are going to be there with the profiles of the kids, and you can introduce yourselves and ask questions about the children that are going to be there, the profiles of the kids. I think that's pretty much for the beginning of the housekeeping items. So let me just share with you why we are doing this, parenting children of color, racial awareness, competences, and for adoptive families. I went to this training several years ago, and one person said like, well, to do this act of love, which is fostering or adopting kids from foster care, kids who have experienced trauma, loss, neglect, abuse, compassion is not enough. And I was like shocked. If compassion is not enough, so what is it then? And he said, you need to be competent. You need compassion, but you need some competences to know what to do. Because it's not as just, okay, all you need is love. You need love, compassion, and some competences. So tonight we want to talk about why it's important to have some competencies and to hear from people who are experiencing that in their own family life, in their adoption story. What are the things they have learned? What are the things that they are struggling with? What are the resources they found useful? So this is the topic that is bringing us here tonight, because we want to introduce you to this reality also, but to the kids that are waiting for permanent homes, children of color, youth of color. And we really are so grateful, thankful that you are here to hear this and to share this and to consider being placed with a child of color, because these children deserve permanency, stability, love, and you are here to learn about that. So let me just move now to introduce the three families. If you want to move, please, the next slide. So let's start with the first family, the Getaway family. You want to start, Vinay, and share a little bit about you, your family experience.
Sure. Thank you, Ricardo. My name is Vinay Gidwani. This is my wife, Sanjali. We're the Gidwani family. We have 3 young children, and if anybody tells you going from 2 to 3 is easier, it's not. It's definitely more complicated and harder. We're typically that family running down the street trying to chase after 3 children. Crazy family that people see us. We're also the parents of we were just talking on the way here, a totally different topic about how to deal with our fish dying. So we're also the family of the fish that's going to pass soon, I think. And we have to
We're much better parents than we are pet owners.
For sure. Our kids don't eat our food. The fish will eat it, though. But we're super blessed to be here. Thank you for having us. Ricardo said competence, I think we're still learning how to become competent, but we love sharing and learning from everybody, so we're excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Janet, you wanna chill a little bit? You wanna move the next one and see this beautiful, beautiful family?
Hi, I'm Janet Labadie Kelly, one of four of the Kelly family. I'm the representative today. So we started our journey early, and my husband David and I knew that we were going to do adoption from the beginning of our relationship. And so we waited a while after marriage, and we went through some challenges for our first adoption, which was private. And that is the big girl, Glory Rose. And now we have our second angel, that is Anastasia Grace. And we adopted her through DCF, which is kind of funny. We were bracing ourselves for the same challenges because we convinced ourselves this is our labor, you know? And she was pretty much an anomaly. I work in the adoption world. It never happened. So hers was more of an easier adoption. And life has never been the same. We have a 3 and 4-year-old now. And it is a roller coaster ride of fun. So, yeah, an amazing experience.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Janet. Now let's go to the next slide, and you'll see this beautiful picture of this family.
So my name is Liz Joyle, and that's me with my husband Paul and our son Javiel, who we adopted. He is Puerto Rican. We are both white, if you can see from the picture. And I love this picture on the left because that is when all three of us were smiling and the dog was looking at the picture. So even though that was 2 years ago, Christmas, that's still one of my favorite photos. Javiel was placed with us when he was 10, just about to turn 11, and he is 15 now. I have a picture of him. That was our trip to Puerto Rico that we took as a family, and he's eating some rice and beans. It's one of my favorite pictures. He's 15 now, like I said, so he doesn't smile in pictures as much, so that's why I use some older pictures, but very grateful for him in our lives. After we adopted Javiel, I realized that I was more passionate about the adoption of older children from foster care than I was with the current work that I was doing. So after 20 years, I changed careers and work at MARE now. Did not do that before because I'm just so passionate about these kids and finding them homes. And I would say two of the things that I'm most passionate about in this work is trauma-competent caregiving and also transracial adoption. I would love to talk to anyone about both of those things at length. So, and I get to do that a lot for my job. So really grateful for that and glad to be here.
Thank you, Liz. So let's focus in 3 competencies that these families agree are important. All the literature in the field. I just spent the last year doing research for a project with Adoptive US Kids and read tons of articles, books, biographies, and stuff, and came to the conclusion those 3 are the 3 competencies that are really important for families who want to adopt or foster, be parents of a child of a different race. And when I say a different race, it doesn't have to be white and people of color, because as we hear tonight, we will see we have people from different continents, and even though the color of the skin seems similar, it's a different cultural background, ethnic background, and that means some challenges and some opportunities too. So let's talk about these 3 competencies and then hear from the experience of this family. So if you want to move to the next slide. So this is the first one, racial awareness. And pretty much, I'm not going to read, I'm going to give you 30 seconds so that you can read. And then I'm going to read a question that I sent these 3 families in advance, so they are thinking about this. And if they want to share their thoughts and experience, that's what we want to hear from them. So I'm going to read just once for the 3 of you, and then if you want to, in any order you want to respond, that's fine. How has the experience of adopting a child or youth of a different ethnic, racial, or cultural background than yours changed, expanded, or confronted your own understanding of racial issues in society in general and or in your own family? That's the question. Who wants to start?
I can go first. So if you saw from the picture, we have a 10-year-old daughter, Leela, and then 2 sons, Niam, who's turning 7 later this week, and Kavion, who's 4. One thing that is true for us that before Kavion joined our family was just in theory is the issue of race. And, we were Indian. And our parents are from India. We grew up in Canada, actually. So we grew up in a very, I think, multicultural environment and had a lot of different cultural influences in our lives. One thing that we, or at least I think a lot about as a father of 2 sons, especially, is how I think about raising my 2 sons to be men and to have confidence and empathy and sensitivity and drive and ambition and all these other things that we care about in our children. One thing that is interesting, we'll talk more about our children in a minute, but they're very unique. All 3 of them are very unique, but the 2 boys are incredibly unique in that they actually fall into a little bit of a stereotype view of children their age. Kavion he loves to dance, he loves to sing, he's really good at athletics. Our other son, Niam, he wears glasses, he's a little nerdy. So if he loves to read, and he was also great at sports too, but they fall into these stereotypes that they have culturally. If you were to see an Indian kid with glasses, you might think, oh, he maybe wins the spelling bee or something, or a black kid running around a field with a football, he's going to be a football player. And they fall into those stereotypes, and it's just who they are. It's their uniqueness, but it dawns on me as a father when I parent them and try to mentor them and raise them about how those stereotypes are driving their own view of themselves, right? And it's sort of a funny balance where I want them to be the individuals that they are, but I also want them to not be what other people think of them just because they're like that. So that's a tricky balance. I haven't figured it out yet, but it's something that, I reflect on a lot, just having 2 sons who are about the same age or close enough to see the differences between them.
Wow. Thank you, Vinay. That's awareness, right? You want to add something?
Yeah, something that has dawned on us, and Kavion's been with us for a couple of years now, since he was 2, he's now 4. The fact that I feel very ill-prepared to have the conversation that many Black parents do with their children, because I still can't believe that we operate and live in a world where that conversation needs to happen, because I don't need to have that conversation with my older 2 children because they are not Black. And that I think hits at our core as parents, that why are we still here? Why are we still having to have these conversations with our Black children? And although I'm not a Black mother, I have so much to learn and surround myself with people who do have these conversations with the children. How do you have them, and how do you reconcile that? So those are some of the power dynamics that we think about that play out in our society a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. You want to add?
So I grew up in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I consider myself a West Indian American, and I'm married to an African American husband, and I'm prepared to raise these Black girls. Yes, we're going to take over the world. They're going to have confidence about themselves. I went into this yes, I am, yes. And then my daughter touches my skin and goes, Mommy, I wish my skin was white like yours. You know? So, like, even as a black mother, I have to face the pressures that society is going to put on my child, with colorism, with what is beautiful, what is not beautiful, what makes you special, and just constantly having to emphasize to her, your beautiful chocolate skin is like gorgeous. People couldn't keep your eyes off of you when you were born, because it was true. Like people would like people stopped and prayed over my daughters without introduction, without knowing them. And that wasn't because of like their skin color. It was because they were beautiful inside and out, and they knew it just being so young. And so to emphasize that to them and let them know their true beauty is gonna be hard work for me, because like society's telling them otherwise, you know. So yeah, I have my challenges as a mother of African descent, and it hit me like a brick. And I was not prepared for it.
Yeah.
Like, I literally call my sister, who is close to their skin tone, and I'm like, what is this? She's like, oh, you thought you were going to escape that. All right, here we go. Roll your sleeve up. Adulting and Parenting 101. So yeah, you're going to face these challenges. And whether you are a parent of color or not.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Janet. Please.
Yeah, I think I would add, right, so adopting a child of color, adopting transracially, it has really made my own understanding of racial issues in our society more real. I think as a white person, it was much easier for them to be theoretical, not like I was unaware of them, but suddenly it was like, it wasn't just the experiences of coworkers or friends, but it was actually experiences that were like happening to people in my home who I love dearly. And so I would just say that kind of like puts like flesh on the bones of theory as a white person for sure. And I would say the realities of adopting a child of color really it's kind of projected me into a lot of just self-learning, both my husband and I, and just a lot of the learning that we needed to do, particularly two ways. I would say one was we really needed to learn a lot more about Puerto Rico and our son's Puerto Rican heritage. You know, obviously I knew a little bit about Puerto Rico, but really needed to more deeply understand both the historical connection between the U.S. and Puerto Rico and our history, and also what it means today to be a Puerto Rican living in the continental U.S. And so to do that, just had like lots of finding people, lots of conversations, reading, kind of like the classic things, but also really finding people who could really help me with that. Particularly some of Javiel's extended family have been really wonderful in teaching and helping me learn. And that was, part of why we even took this trip to Puerto Rico as a family. Javi had never been there before. It wasn't like that was something that he had, missed, but it was, just really building that sense of identity in him and wanting to do that. And I could go on for that. But the second thing is just like a lot of self-learning and self-reflecting on what it means to be a white couple who've adopted a child of color. And particularly just like what it means for Javiel to have two very white parents, and just what kind of trying to observe, take things. He's not a huge talker, so he doesn't like sit us down and be like, okay, this is what it feels like right now. But we have to like investigate and really be detectives of his experience and what it's like, and change our behavior. for his sake. And so just as a tiny little example, I think one thing, when he first came, the first summer he was with us, he was going to a YMCA camp during the day. And he's not a huge talker, and so we had no idea what he did all day, like absolutely no idea. We knew that he was doing well, the staff loved him, but we had no idea. And then family night came up, and we were like, oh, hooray, we get to go figure out what he has been learning, or what he's been doing all day, because we have no idea what he does for 8 hours of the day. And then he said, which I'm so proud of him at 11 years old for being able to say, no, I don't want to go, because everybody's going to ask questions. Because it would be him with 2 white parents. And so we could have said, no, this is a thing that we have to do. We need to know more about what's going on. But we were like, no, okay, with that, this is not the time to make you have to deal with that. You're 11 years old. So then we didn't go, and I never found out what he did. But that's okay. And then, yeah, I'm sorry, I'll stop talking.
That's fine. So as you can listen to this, there's a common thread here. Society is telling these kids one narrative about who they are. How are you going to counterbalance that? Not just with your narrative, but with your practices, with your routines, with your, not just the self-awareness, but the conversations with other people in the family. So, a lot of things to talk here, but we need to move to the next one. The next one is multicultural planning. I'm going to give you 30 seconds so that you can read the definition of the competence. So just to keep in mind 2 things: intentional, informed planning. So I'm going to ask you, can you share an example of a new routine in your family that has been incorporated as a way to provide a space for racial identity development for your adopted child and multicultural learning for you as a family? So what are the spaces, what are the new routines, what are the new practices that you are saying, oh my goodness, we have to do something here, otherwise society keeps telling our kids the same narrative, we need to do something. So who want to share about that new routine, new experience, new space?
You know, there's so much to be done. There's so much to be learned. Our routines were pretty simple to begin with. And over time, I think as they grow and as our children get older, like yours, we were very intentional about making sure that KV could see himself in a light of how amazing and wonderful he is, but to see himself represented in the books and in the movies and the articles and the poetry and the art that we consume as a family, and especially in who we interact with. One of my favorite books that we read to him is Brown Boy, What Can You Be? Now, that wasn't a book that was on our bookshelf before him. But we had to be really intentional about having him see himself as a scientist or a mathematician or a pilot or an engineer, because we've had friends and family say, you know, when you grow up and you're a famous rapper or a famous basketball player, I'm like, or an architect or an entrepreneur or a doctor or pretty much anything he wants to be. And they catch themselves because he needs to see himself in a way that he can be anything that he wants to be, and why shouldn't he be? And I think that was really important to us. We also, there's moments where he says to us, he sees someone that looks like him, he says, Mama, brown like me. And we remind him, brown like me too. So we can see ourselves as different shades. It's not at all having him celebrate who he sees himself in, and then having him see himself as also part of us. So that's been something new, and we'll keep growing and learning. I don't know. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think definitely all of that as well. We also, as I said, we're Indian, and so we are involved in Indian cultural things too, like the food and the dance and the music and everything. And as I mentioned before, he's a great dancer and a great singer. He probably knows more Hindi than our other two kids at this point. And I think it goes sort of both ways, right? We want him to see himself in the other environments, but we also want him to feel very comfortable around other people that look like his parents and his siblings, and for that to be just something that he can move in and out of and feels very comfortable in any of those environments. So I think we're trying to be there's always more that we could be doing, but we try to be more intentional about leveling the playing field of all cultures and saying you can be yourself in any of these cultures. You can embrace them and learn them and look for the greatness in all of them. It's not just you have to be one part of one group or another group. You're really part of this culture and this community.
Thank you. Daniel, Liz?
So in our household, it's not just about sharing our cultures, and yes, we do have similar cultures, but we kind of make it important for us to teach our daughters that their history didn't begin with slavery. I grew up, like I said, in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and history there is different from history here, and I thank God for that. So we learn about ancient civilizations, and to emphasize that to our daughters and let them know that, like, it started way early. Our culture did not, like, start with slavery and overcoming, and that's very important to us. In addition to seeing themselves reflected in shows like, thank you, Doc McStuffins, because my oldest wants to be a doctor that goes to Harvard. And she's 4. Yes, I'm proud. I hope she doesn't change her mind. She will. She wants to be a trash person, but the guy want to drive the big trucks. But seeing themselves reflected in those characters, different shades, it was a big thing. Choosing a school was so stressful for my husband and I, because my husband grew up in this area, grew up in Medford, but went to school actually in Lexington. And so he would always said he dealt with a lot of insecurities being in a predominantly white school. And so it was imperative for us to find a school that was very culturally diverse and teach them their history and their culture. So there's like many layers to making sure that your child learns about their culture and peel them, like peel them. It's way more than learning African American history. It's learning about what happened what happened in Africa, what was invented in Africa, and the different countries. And Africa is not a continent. Yes, it is a continent, but it's more than that. It's a continent made up of different countries with different cultures and different histories, and it's very important that we share that with our kids of color. And say that with South America, if you adopt a child from South America, same thing. There's different layers. You peel it, you learn it. It's hard work, but it will pay off with a very educated and confident child.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, in terms of routine, I think that we incorporated kind of big picture, kind of taking going off a little bit what Janet was talking about. We Paul and I decided that we didn't know who we were going to be placed with, but we moved. We live in Worcester. We moved across our city into a more. We were in a pretty diverse place, but into an even more diverse part of the city, because we knew that if we did adopt transracially, the child that was placed with us would be in the minority in our house, and so we wanted that child to be able to be in the majority elsewhere. And so, and that was by moving that he had a lot of access to that. His school it was in our neighborhood, ended up, there was only, I think, 2 white children in most of his classes when he was in elementary school. Lots of people looked like him. He had access to the baseball team that he played on when he first came to us, because of where the neighborhood boundary line was completely Puerto Rican and Dominican, and his coach was Puerto Rican. So Paul and I were the only white people at the games on our side of the dugout, which was great for us to be in that position and really good for him to be in that position. But the school really opened up his friend networks to, most of his friends are kids of color, including his very best friend, who is also Puerto Rican and comes from a very high identity Puerto Rican family. And Javi really takes a lot of his cultural cues from his friend, Alexiel, which is, we're just so grateful for. Like he is able to look at him. He kind of acts like a cultural surrogate, even as another 14, 15-year-old boy. It's really, I think, very special for him to have that. So he looks to him. And I know we're running out of time. I think another new routine is also how we celebrate holidays. Holidays are very different in Puerto Rican culture than they are in, especially my husband's French-Canadian side of the family. And so we've really worked hard to incorporate his traditions into our family, but also to give him freedom to go to his best friend's house for the second half of Thanksgiving, so that he can be with a Puerto Rican family and have that really late night dancing experience that he's honestly not going to get in a French-Canadian house, right? It's just not going to happen. And so being able to provide that for him is super important. So just opening up spaces, being very intentional, and me being very intentional to go places where I'm the only white person is very important.
Thank you, Liz. You know what? We tend to think that we are diverse because we have diverse, symbolic diversity. Let me explain this. Oh yes, we will learn how to go once a month to this restaurant, ethnic restaurant. Yeah, we will take her to somebody who can take care of her skin and her hair. That's symbolic diversity. What we are asking you to consider is doing the work of history, culture, media, movies, celebration, traditions, and being open and say, am I willing to make this expansion in my life so that I can embrace other cultures and other traditions? Because otherwise, what you're doing is just taking your child to be exposed to his or her thing there. And the whole thing about racial identity development is so complex that it takes more than just a visit to a restaurant once a month. Thank you for sharing those really deep experiences. And Liz mentioned cultural surrogate. In one point, if you ended up being placed with a child of a different race, you will need somebody from that particular racial ethnic background to help you. Nothing wrong with say, I don't understand you. I don't feel the same. I don't have that background. I need help. And you will find those people. One more thing before we go to the next one. Can you go around and look for professionals that mirror the race of your child, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a dentist, whether it's a counselor, whether it's a coach. Otherwise, they will live in a wide world and being told that you can do whatever you want. Well, I don't see myself reflected in those other adults in my life. Great, next one. This is the last one. I give you 25 seconds so that you can read. So this is the question for them. As your family is navigating and interacting now with extended family and friends, whether it's in the neighborhood, the school, co-workers, now with an adopted child or children of a different race, can you think of one incident that has prompted you to prepare your child to encounter and deal with racism? I'm not talking about the intentions of that uncle. They had the best intentions. I'm talking about the impact of that comment, of that look, of that joke. Can you think in any incident that had prompted look, oh my goodness, we need to prepare ourselves for this? Who wants to start? Yeah, let's start here.
Sure, I can start. Well, so being the parent of a 15-year-old boy of color, we have had multiple incidents or opportunities to talk to both our son and his friends. His friends are always at our house about these issues. And one in particular, I mean, there's been a few, but one in particular, you know, I mean, he's a teenage boy. They love riding their bikes around, doing wheelies all over the place. And, you know, we've had, and they're just like travel in packs. And so we've had to not only talk about what, you know, what that profiling happens, that it exists, that they could be profiled in the 7-Eleven down the street from us, even if they're just hanging out. And but then there have been a few incidences where, one in particular, 3 of them were riding their bikes, and an undercover officer thought that they were part of the group that was throwing bricks off of the parking garage and tackled one of them. Thankfully, our son was not there. Had he been tackled, I can only imagine how he would have reacted because of his trauma background. He would have punched back. It was not a good situation. But that, you know, is again a situation that prompted the conversation again of what it means to be, you know, to be a person of color, a boy of color in the United States. And you know, we've talked about the story of Khalif Browder with him. If you don't know that one, that's a good one to look up and to talk about. And we've even had the conversation. He has 2 white friends that are around a good amount, and we've even had the conversation with them about what they need to do if an incident occurs and what their responsibility is and how they need to. One of them in particular would be great at this. He's very good at diffusing situations and would be able to handle it well. And so we've even coached them in how to deal with potential situations. We have a ton of things like that in where we are, but that's like my greatest fear, is that something like that would happen where he would be assumed to have done something wrong, even if he hadn't, and for it to escalate and for him to end up arrested because he'd been profiled like that. So many conversations like that.
So, of course, my husband and I have lived those experiences, been through those experiences, and I can say that we were prepared, but nothing prepares you for it. I thought I'd have more time, though. Like when my daughter was a newborn, I think I shared this with Ricardo, one of my coworkers, she was a gorgeous kid, and the coworker said, "She's beautiful. She's dark skinned, and that's okay, but she's beautiful." And first of all, I had to process. I am at work. And I had to break that conversation down in my head, and it like clicked. Like, this is going to be a little bit challenging than I thought it would be, and than I was prepared for. Because as much as you think you're prepared for it, you never are. And like I said before, choosing schools, making sure it's a school that I feel that my child is safe in, because the statistics are out there. Like, children of color don't get to have a bad day. They're deemed a problem. Like, they're deemed unmanageable, bad behavior, you know. And so I wanted a school where I knew that my kids were safe and allowed to have their bad days. And boy, they're testing their teachers. But, you know, I'm very involved with their teachers. I'm very protective. Email me. I'll come to the school. I'll talk to my child. Because my worst nightmare is watching my toddler in handcuffs, like I've seen on the news. Like, that's what they're doing. Girl, boy, they don't care. Like, the teacher needed to de-escalate you, so you're in handcuffs. And I don't know if I am prepared to see my child like that. I am not prepared to see my child like that. So I do these things to protect them from the situation. So, yeah.
You're hearing our future in your conversations here. So I'll take you back in time a little bit when the British ruled over India. You know, Indians have this historical perspective of colorism, right? They themselves put them below white people. They're like, okay, white people are at the top, they're the fairest, and then we're in the middle, and then somewhere below are black people. And so we were very scared about how our child would be embraced into our culture, into our community. You do not historically see Indian families with young black children. And so with that in mind, we were recently in Puerto Rico, 6 families, all of our best friends. And everyone was drinking, and suddenly some comments started flying around about, oh, my parents, they own this property, and all these black people moved in and drove down the real estate prices. I was like, what? I was like, we have a black child. Like, how could you say that? And so very appropriately, my husband planted a conversation starter that said, what is one thing you could change about yourself? And everybody went around and said their thing. And my response was, I wish I could forgive you when you made comments like that. But since I can't, you need to be better. I mean, it is not my responsibility to constantly educate you, but I will, because you're my friend. But it is your job to be better, because you can love my child, have good intentions, but not respect his identity. That's a problem. So you need to be better. And that's a really hard conversation to lean into with your best friends. But they need to know. And we have to, what matters is when he grows up and hears these things, he's going to ask us, well, why do you hang out with people like that then? And our response is not, we have to choose, right? We have to choose our actions, and that's the only thing we can choose. We can't choose what other people say, but we can choose how we respond to them. And we need him to see that we stand up for him. We stand up for our family.
Yeah, that was very well said. And you know, the only thing I'd add is, you know, just looking at that, like microaggressions, macroaggressions. I also think it's important to flip that into micro. I'm trying to think of a clever opposite of aggressions, but you know, micro supports or macro supporting that you can give that make it okay to talk about color and race, but do it in a way that is more personal and okay. Like I found myself doing this thing recently, and and it was not, it was totally just haphazard, but I do it now consistently, where he asks, Kavion, say, what's your favorite color? It's just a sort of favorite question to ask everybody. And my answer to him always is you. And he gets confused with me. I was like, why are you saying you? Like, I'm asking what your favorite color is. And I was like, said you. And then he sort of caught on now, and he says, brown like me. And I'm like, yeah, brown like you. And, the important thing is to flip some of those things where you might be talking about race. And you have to talk about it. We have to confront these things. But we can also flip those conversations into things that are positive things about color, because you can't ignore it. So you just embrace it and show our love through that.
Thank you, Vinay. Well, you see, we can spend the whole night here. It's too much to learn, to share about the experiences, but we want to spend the next 10 minutes with questions so that we can maybe hear from you, or even a final comment or something that comes to mind. So the mic is open for questions. Who wants to start? Can you use the mic so that everybody can listen?
Sorry, pretty loud, so I can hear me. So we have a kid already, and I find it difficult to find time to step back and think about my parenting strategies. How do you make that happen?
How long have you had your child?
I mean, I feel like one of them is always not happy with us, so that's a pretty good reflection on our parenting at some point in time during the day. Honestly, like it's a good question. We don't get enough time to do that, and we don't even have enough time together to even do anything to just think about parenting. But I do think that we do try to ask questions of ourselves when your child is behaving a certain way, right? There are mirrors to your parenting, and that's one thing that reflects on us a lot, that we even see ourselves in them, and what our own flaws are, we see them, that sort of bounced back to us. So that's often our sort of trigger point to say, okay, something's going on here. We're not giving enough love. We're not being attentive to this, or we're not paying attention to that. And I think that for us is our reflection point. So it's less sort of like, okay, let's plan our parenting in some sort of like master project plan of some kind, but more about in the reaction, taking a pause to realize your child is trying to tell you something through their behavior that they're not able to articulate.
I think I might add that I wish we did so much of a better job with reading and just informing ourselves. The best solution I found was to have more conversations with people that know everything that we don't. We were so fortunate enough to have a person of color who matched the race and identity of our child as our social worker, and she has been our save-all for everything. We've had teachers, teachers who come from a foster background. And so my saving grace has been in those moments of conversation where I can learn a whole lot that I don't know that any book could really teach me. And taking the time to kind of reflect on those conversations, but surrounding with yourselves with people that know a lot that you don't just yet. And we're all learning, right?
Any of you want to add?
Sure, I just want to also add, like, we sometimes never have time to deal with it, but the constant reminder that, and it's a phrase in my house that's come back to haunt me, we're all works in progress, right? So even sometimes you're not gonna get it right, but you get to learn from it. So although like right now my kids are like breaking stuff, I'm a work in progress, but we're working on that. But yeah, just reminding yourselves in those times where you're like, I should have got it right. Like reflecting, sometimes even going back When you do have the time, like, let me fix this moment. Let's talk about it.
Thank you, Janet. Any other question?
First, thank you so much for taking time out of your lives to be here with us. Question I have is kind of preparation, right? When it comes to your extended family and knowing the path you were going down, what were some preparation steps you took to have conversations early with them? Assuming there's going to be best intentions, but maybe some crass comments here and there. Were there any folks, relatives that you had that you knew I should probably have a little bit of a conversation beforehand? But just curious if there was anything of that nature and what you found to work well for you when speaking to your extended family.
Not everyone even understands anything about adoption from foster care. So there are some people in my actual family that I care, my husband's family that we care very deeply about, who we can't actually share deeply about our parenting with them or about our child, because it's like we're not going to have a good conversation. So I say that because I know that I've had conversations with others where it's like, it's not necessarily choosing. I mean, I will always have to choose my son over extended family.
And I just want to say something about this. The impact of some contexts and some situations in a child. You have to balance that with your educational piece with uncle and aunt crazy in your family, who, no matter how much you explain it 1,000 times, it won't change. But this child is being formed, transformed, and being healed from trauma, rejection, and all that. So you have to balance the educational piece with your extended family and the care and support and healing of a child that really needs that.
So at the end of the day, I have to protect my kid. I mean, there's some that you can educate. There's some that you can pull along. But when you see you're trying your best and they're not doing the steps needed, sorry, we will love you, we will send you pictures, but we will keep you at a distance. Boundaries for the protection of my kid.
We had a little bit of a different experience, to be honest. Our family members were more like, we shared a picture with them, and we're like, this is our son. He will be part of your life. And their reaction was, it will take us some time to get used to this, but tell us what we got to do. And so we were very fortunate in that our parents, his great-grandmother, everybody was like, just tell us what we need to do to be good for this child. And so I'd send him like Jada Pinkett Smith Red Table Talk, like conversations, like things that they could like connect with that weren't like dense and heavy, but it was just enough. But I mean, once they saw him, that was it. They were in love. There was no question in their mind. That's their grandson, and then that's pretty much it. But they still got to learn. We still all got to learn. So we have to continue that education with them. But I think you would be very surprised sometimes with how welcoming and open their hearts really are, especially when they meet your child.
Thank you. Well, we need to close this first part of the event tonight. We want to thank you, the families, for coming, sharing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.